The letter was delivered on a Monday morning. Not by email, not through the company's internal system. By hand, a sealed envelope placed on my desk by my personal assistant with the specific expression of someone who has been asked to deliver something they did not read and are not sure they would want to. The envelope had no name on it, just 2 words: fire him. I sat with it for a moment. The office around me was what it always was. The Abuja skyline through the tall windows, the polished desk that had been my father's before it was mine, the smell of the morning coffee that Hawa brought at 7:45 every day without being asked, because she had been doing it for 11 years and had decided it was simply part of the structure of the morning. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, a list of reasons, 7 of them, each one carefully worded, each one designed to appear professional and objective and completely reasonable. Each one, when read by someone who knew what was actually happening in this company and this family, revealing exactly who had written it and exactly what they were afraid of. The mechanic's name was Femi Adeyinka. He was 34 years old. He had been maintaining the company's vehicle fleet for 3 years. He worked from a small workshop 2 streets from the company's main facility, and he came every Monday and Thursday with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood that his job was to keep things running and not to make a performance of the keeping. He did not know about the letter. He did not know about many things. But I knew. And the reason I refused to fire him, the reason that would, eventually, shock everyone in that room on the afternoon when the truth finally arrived, was not the reason anyone would have guessed. Stay with me. Because this story begins with a letter. And it ends with something no one in that family had the courage to say out loud until the day they had no choice. Subscribe now. Because what happens next will stay with you. My name is Nneka Obichukwu. I am 53 years old. I have been the managing director of Obichukwu Holdings for 16 years, since my father died and left me a company that was profitable and a family that was complicated, and the specific heavy understanding that the 2 things were connected in ways that would take me years to fully map. The company operated across logistics, real estate, and agro-processing in 5 states. My father had built it from a single transport business in the 80s, the way men of his generation built things, with patience and consistency and the absolute refusal to let the size of the ambition exceed the integrity of the work. He had passed both the company and the principle to me. I had tried to honor both. The family had, over 16 years, tested my ability to honor both in ways my father had not anticipated and that I had not been prepared for. The family consisted of the following people. My brother Emeka, 50 years old, who had expected to inherit the company based on the logic of his gender and his seniority, and who had spent 16 years in the specific, corrosive position of someone who believes they have been wronged by an arrangement they cannot change, but cannot accept. He ran the real estate division with genuine competence and genuine resentment, and the 2 qualities existed in him simultaneously, in the way that contradictions exist in people who are intelligent enough to do good work and wounded enough to undermine it. My mother, Mama Obichukwu, 76 years old, who was the most significant person in every room she entered, and who had been managing the distance between her 2 children for 16 years, with the specific exhaustion of a woman who loves both her children and can see exactly what is happening between them and has not been able to stop it. My daughter Amara, 26 years old, who worked in the company's finance division, and who had the particular quality of someone who has grown up watching a parent run something significant and has absorbed both the competence and the cost of it. And Emeka's son, my nephew Obinna, 29 years old, who had joined the company 2 years ago and who had arrived with his father's intelligence and his father's resentment in a form that was newer and therefore more dangerous because it had not yet been worn smooth by the years. The letter, I knew immediately, had been written by Obinna. The handwriting was too careful for his father. Emeka expressed things with directness, even when the directness was wrong. This letter had the specific quality of something that had been drafted and revised and calibrated, the work of someone younger who had not yet learned that careful calibration was itself a form of revelation. I set the letter on the desk. I looked at the Abuja skyline. I thought about Femi Adeyinka, about why he was being targeted, about the 7 reasons in the letter, none of which were the real reason, and about the one real reason that none of them had said out loud, because saying it out loud would have required them to say something else first, something they had spent 3 years trying to bury. I had hired Femi Adeyinka 3 years ago after the previous fleet contractor had failed to maintain the vehicles to the standard the company's operational requirements demanded. The failure had been documented. 3 breakdowns in 2 months, a missed delivery that had cost the logistics division a significant client, a maintenance log that, when reviewed by my head of operations, revealed a pattern of deferred service that was either incompetence or deliberate negligence, and was, in either case, unacceptable. I had asked for 3 referrals. Femi had been the 3rd. He came to the interview, which he had been told was a standard contractor evaluation, and which was, in practice, an assessment of how he handled himself in a room where he was being watched more carefully than he knew, in clean work clothes rather than a suit, which told me he had decided to come as what he was rather than as what the room might prefer. I respected that immediately. He brought a portfolio of his work, not a formal document, a notebook. Handwritten records of every vehicle he had serviced over 4 years, organized by make and model and service interval, with notes on recurring issues and how they had been resolved. The notebook was the most honest professional document I had seen in a long time. I hired him that afternoon. He had been coming to the company's vehicle bay every Monday and Thursday for 3 years. In 3 years, the fleet had not had a single unplanned breakdown. In 3 years, the maintenance cost per vehicle had decreased by 23%. In 3 years, Femi had not been late once, had not missed a single scheduled service, and had not submitted a single invoice that was more than what was quoted. These were the facts. The 7 reasons in Obinna's letter were not about the facts. They were about something else. Something that had started 8 months ago on a Tuesday afternoon, when Obinna had come to the vehicle bay to collect a car and had found his grandmother, Mama Obichukwu, sitting in the small waiting area beside the bay, talking to Femi. Not about vehicles, about his late grandfather. Femi had been describing in the specific way of someone who did not know the significance of what he was saying, how he had learned his trade, from a man named Chike, who had run a workshop on the outskirts of Enugu, who had taken in young men who needed the work, and had taught them not just the mechanics, but the philosophy of the work, the understanding that keeping things running was a form of care for the people who depended on the things running. Mama Obichukwu had gone very still. Obinna had seen her face from the doorway. He had not said anything, but he had stood there for long enough to understand that something was happening that he did not understand. And Obinna's response to things he did not understand was not to seek understanding. It was to remove the thing that was producing the confusion. That was the real reason for the letter, not the 7 reasons on the page. The look on his grandmother's face when she heard the name Chike. The name Chike had a history in this family, not a comfortable one. My father, Chukwuemeka Obichukwu, the man who had built the company and passed it to me, had a brother named Chike, the elder brother, the one who, by the logic of birth order and the family's understanding of inheritance, should have received the company when their father died in 1987. He had not received it. What he had received instead was a settlement, money, a property, and the specific permanent wound of someone who has been passed over for something they believed was theirs. He had left Enugu. He had gone to Lagos. He had, from what the family knew, built something small and honest with what he had received and had raised a family, and had not, in the 37 years since the settlement, made any contact with the Obichukwu family. My father had spoken about his brother exactly once, in my presence, near the end of his life. He had said, "I took something that was not mine to take. Your grandfather made a decision that was wrong. I benefited from that wrong decision. I have carried that for 40 years. He had said nothing more. He had died 3 months later. I had thought about those words for 16 years. I had not known until 8 months ago when Femi Adeyinka described a man named Chike, who had run a workshop on the outskirts of Enugu and had taught young men the philosophy of keeping things running. I had not known whether the carrying my father had described had ever been put down. But when I heard the name Chike, I knew. I knew that the thing my father had carried for 40 years had not disappeared when he died. It had simply been waiting, in the particular patient way of true things, for the right moment to arrive. And the right moment had arrived in a vehicle bay on a Tuesday afternoon, in the shape of a 34-year-old mechanic who did not know what his grandfather's name meant to this family. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found when I started looking. I did not tell anyone what I was doing. Not Amara, not my mother, not the company's legal team. I looked alone, the way my father had carried the thing alone, because some things belong to the person doing them before they belong to anyone else. What I found took 3 weeks. Femi Adeyinka had been born in Lagos in 1990 to a woman named Adaeze Adeyinka, who had been born Adaeze Obichukwu in Enugu in 1965. Adaeze Obichukwu was my father's niece, Chike's daughter, which meant that Femi Adeyinka was my father's great-nephew, which meant that the man who had been maintaining this company's fleet for 3 years, the man whose grandfather had been passed over for the inheritance that built everything I had been managing for 16 years, was family. Not in the performed sense, in the actual sense, in the specific, legal, documented sense that a family lawyer would describe in precise language, in a room where everyone was sitting very still. I sat at my desk with the documents in front of me. I thought about my father's words. I took something that was not mine to take. I thought about the letter on my desk with 7 reasons and 1 real reason. I thought about Obinna standing in the doorway of the vehicle bay, watching his grandmother's face change at the sound of a name. I thought about what it meant that Femi did not know. He did not know. He had been coming to this company every Monday and Thursday for 3 years, maintaining the vehicles of the family that had displaced his grandfather, and he had done it with the honest efficiency of someone who had no idea what he was standing in the middle of. I could have told him immediately. I could have called him into my office that day and placed the documents on the desk and said, "This is who you are. This is who we are. This is what happened between our families 37 years ago." I did not. Not because I was afraid of the telling. Because the telling required something before it. A reckoning with my brother, with my nephew, with my mother, who I now understood had sat in that vehicle bay and heard the name Chike and had known exactly what she was sitting across from, and had said nothing. The reckoning was coming. I was going to make sure it happened in the right room, at the right moment, with every person who needed to be present. I put the documents in the folder. I put the folder in my desk drawer. I looked at the letter with the 7 reasons. I picked up my pen. I wrote 2 words at the top of the letter. Not happening. I called Hawa. "Tell Obinna I want to see him at 10, I said. "Yes, Ma," she said. I looked at the Abuja skyline. The city moved through its morning with the complete indifference it brought to everything. The traffic and the generators and the particular alive texture of a place that never fully stopped. I was not indifferent, but I was patient. My father had taught me that too. Obinna arrived at 10, with the posture of someone who has submitted a proposal and is expecting either approval or a manageable negotiation. He sat across from my desk, with his hands folded, and his expression carefully neutral in the way of someone who has been raised around corporate environments and has learned to perform neutrality without achieving it. He was 29 years old, and he had his father's intelligence and his father's wound, and he was about to learn something about both. I placed the letter on the desk between us. He looked at it. "You read it," he said. "Yes," I said. "And?" he said. "Tell me why," I said. He blinked. "The reasons are in the—" "Tell me why," I said again. My voice was the same voice it was in every meeting, level, specific, carrying no more weight than the situation required, and not 1 gram less. He was quiet for a moment. "He's been here 3 years," he said. "The contract is up for renewal. It's a natural point to reassess." "Obinna," I said. He stopped. "You were at the vehicle bay 8 months ago," I said, "on a Tuesday. You came to collect the Prado." Something shifted in his face. "You saw your grandmother talking to Femi," I said. "You heard her face change when he said a name." He was very still. "What name did he say?" I said. The office was quiet. The city outside the window continued its enormous, indifferent work. Obinna looked at the letter. "I don't know what you mean," he said. He knew exactly what I meant. "All right," I said. "We'll have the full conversation when the time is right." I picked up the letter. "But I want to be clear about something. Femi Adeyinka's contract is not being terminated. Not now. Not based on this letter. Not based on any version of this letter that might follow it." Obinna looked at me. "Why?" he said. And in the question was the real question. Not why are you keeping him, but what do you know that I don't know? "Because I have a reason," I said, "and you'll understand it when I'm ready to explain it." He stood. He was trying to read me with the specific, calibrated assessment of someone who has grown up around this woman and has learned that her silences contain more than her speech, and that trying to decode the silences directly is usually less productive than watching what comes after them. "When?" he said. "Soon," I said. "Sit down with that question in the meantime." He left. I sat at my desk. I looked at the drawer where the folder was. I picked up the phone. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Mama," I said. "The vehicle bay, 8 months ago." A silence, long enough to confirm what I already knew. "You knew?" I said. Another silence. "Come to the house tonight," she said quietly. "We need to talk." My mother's house was the house I had grown up in. A large, comfortable place in the Maitama district that smelled of the specific combination of her cooking and the particular wood polish she had used since before I was born, and that I associated, at the deepest level, with the word home. She was in the sitting room when I arrived, sitting in the chair that had been my father's chair, the one she had kept exactly where it was since the day he died, in the specific loyalty of someone for whom a chair in a particular position was still, in some irreducible way, occupied. She looked old tonight. Not in the way she usually looked. Mama Obichukwu was a woman who wore her age with the confidence of someone who had earned every year of it and had no interest in performing otherwise. Tonight, she looked old in a different way. The specific tiredness of someone who has been carrying a thing for too long and has just been told they can set it down. I sat across from her. "How long have you known?" I said. "Since the day your father told me," she said. "Before he died." I sat with that. "He told you about Chika," I said. "He told me everything," she said. "What his father did. What he allowed to happen. How Cheek left." She looked at the chair beside her, the empty one. "He was trying to clean himself before he went. He needed someone to hear it." "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. She looked at me. "Because the telling was his to do," she said. "Not mine. He wanted to tell you himself, and then he ran out of time." She paused. And then the company was yours and there was so much happening, and I thought the truth would find its own way. The way truths do. The truth found its way into a vehicle bay, I said. She almost smiled. Yes, she said. It did. Tell me about Cheek, I said. She told me. What she told me took an hour. And when she finished, the sitting room was quiet, and the city was doing its night sounds beyond the walls, and the lamp beside my father's chair was casting its familiar warm circle on the same spot it had been casting it for 30 years. Chike Obi-Chukwu had left Enugu in 1987 with the settlement money and a wound that was real, and that he had chosen, according to what my mother knew, to heal rather than to nurse. He had gone to Lagos. He had started a workshop. He had built something small and honest. He had married a woman named Ngozi. He had a daughter, Adaeze. He had died in 2011 of the specific ordinary illness of a man who had worked hard his whole life, and whose body had finally decided the work was done. His daughter, Adaeze, had moved to Abuja in 2005. She had married a man named Adeyinka. She had a son named Femi. Femi had learned to fix engines from his grandfather's workshop in Lagos during school holidays, in the specific way that skills pass from grandfather to grandson in the years when the grandson does not yet understand what the learning means. He had not known. Adaeze had not told him, because Adaeze did not know the full story, because Chike had chosen, in the specific dignity of a man who has decided not to raise his children in the shadow of an old wrong, to give his daughter a life that was not defined by what had been taken. So Femi had come to this company without knowing, without any of it. Just a man with a notebook and a skill, and the honest efficiency of someone who had learned from someone who had also been honest and efficient and had been displaced for it. I sat with all of it. Then I looked at my mother. I need to fix this, I said. I know, she said. It will require a conversation that changes things, I said. For Emeka, for Obinna, for the company. I know that too, she said. Are you ready for it? I said. She looked at the empty chair. She looked at me. Your father was not a bad man, she said. He was a man who made a wrong choice and spent 40 years knowing it was wrong and not knowing how to correct it. She paused. You are going to correct it. She held my gaze. I have been ready for that since the day he told me. I drove home through the Abuja night. I thought about Femi Adeyinka on Monday morning, coming through the company gate with his toolkit, maintaining the vehicles of the family that had displaced his grandfather, with no idea what he was standing in. I thought about what I was going to say, when I was going to say it, and who needed to be in the room when I did. The answer to all three questions arrived by the time I reached my gate. The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. I called it a board review, routine, quarterly, the kind of gathering that required the presence of the full senior team and, in this family's structure, the family members who held executive positions. Emeka was there. Obinna was there. Amara was there, in her role as head of finance, with the specific alertness of someone who had noticed that her mother was carrying something and had been watching for what it was. My mother was there, which was not routine. She attended board reviews rarely, reserving her presence for moments that required the weight of it. Her presence alone told the room that this was not what it had been called. The company lawyer, Barrister Ngozi Eze, was there. I had called her personally the day before and given her a specific brief. She had listened without interrupting and had asked 2 precise questions and had said she would have the necessary documents prepared by Friday morning. And Femi was there. I had called him on Thursday evening. I had said, I need you to come to the office tomorrow morning. Not for the vehicles, for a meeting. He had been quiet for a moment. What kind of meeting? He said. The kind where you find out something important, I said. Bring your grandfather's name. Another silence. Which name? He said. "Chike," I said. The silence that followed was different from the others. I heard him process it the way you hear a person process something in a phone call, in the quality of the breathing, in the specific texture of the quiet. "I'll be there," he said. He came at 9. He was wearing clean clothes, not work clothes this time. He had understood from the call that this was a different kind of day. He sat in the waiting area outside the boardroom with his hands flat on his knees and the expression of someone who has been told something significant is coming and has decided to receive it without performance. Hawa brought him coffee. He held it without drinking. I watched him through the glass panel of my office door for a moment. 34 years old. His grandfather's hands. His grandfather's quiet. I opened my office door and walked to the boardroom. The boardroom of Obi Chukwu Holdings was a room that had been built to communicate significance. The long mahogany table, the leather chairs, the gold-framed portraits of my father and grandfather on the wall, the Abuja skyline visible through the tall windows with the specific, indifferent beauty of a view that had been there before any of the decisions made in this room and would be there after. My father's portrait looked down from the wall with the expression he always had in formal photographs. Composed, specific, the expression of a man who knew what the moment required and was providing it. I looked at the portrait as the room filled. Emeka came in with the posture of someone who has been told a routine meeting is happening and is performing routine attendance, while his instincts tell him something else is happening. He sat in his chair and looked at the room, and looked at my mother, and looked at the lawyer, and recalibrated. Obinna sat beside his father with the expression of someone who has been waiting for something, and is not sure whether what is arriving is what he has been waiting for, or something else entirely. Amara sat beside me with the focused, quiet attention she brought to everything. My mother sat at the far end of the table, in the chair she sat in when she came to these meetings. Not the head, not the foot, the specific position of someone who is present as a witness rather than a participant, and whose witnessing is itself a form of authority. Barrister Easy sat with her papers in front of her, organized with the specific neutrality of someone who knows what the documents say and knows what they will produce, and has decided that her role is to present rather than to manage. Femi came in last. I had asked Hawa to bring him in when everyone was seated. He walked through the boardroom door and stood for a moment. The marble floors reflected his shoes. Clean, not expensive. The chandelier above the table cast its warm light on faces that were turned toward him with different expressions. Emeka's expression was the controlled blankness of someone who does not yet understand the configuration of what he is looking at. Obinna's expression was wariness, sharpened to a point. Amara's was curiosity without judgment. My mother's was the specific, full quality of someone who has been waiting for a moment for a long time and is now present to its arrival. Femi looked at the portrait on the wall. I watched him look at it. He had seen it before. He had been in this building many times over 3 years, but he had never been in this room. And the portrait, seen from this room, from this table, surrounded by these faces, carried a different weight than it carried in a corridor or a lobby. He looked at the portrait for 3 seconds. Then he looked at me. I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat. The room was quiet. I looked at each person in it. Then I began. My father built this company, I said. Everyone in this room knows that. What most people in this room don't know, what I didn't fully know until 3 weeks ago, is that he built it on a foundation that was not entirely his. Emeka looked up. 37 years ago, I said, my grandfather made a decision about the family's inheritance. He passed over his elder son in favor of his younger son. He passed over Chiki in favor of my father. I paused. My father knew this was wrong. He told my mother before he died. He called it a wrong choice. He carried it for 40 years. The room was very still. The elder son, Chike, left Enugu in 1987. He went to Lagos. He built a workshop. He raised a family. He died in 2011. I looked at Femi. He had a daughter named Adizi. Adizi married a man named Adeyinka. She had a son. I held Femi's gaze. His name is Femi, I said. He learned to fix engines from his grandfather's workshop in Lagos during school holidays. He built a business. He came to this company 3 years ago and maintained our fleet with more honesty and consistency than any contractor we have ever had. The room absorbed this. Emeka was looking at Femi with the expression of someone whose model of a situation has just been rewritten by a single sentence, and who is in the process of reconstructing everything he thought he understood. Obina had gone very still. My mother had her eyes closed. Femi was looking at the portrait. "You are Chike's grandson," I said, "which makes you my father's great-nephew, which makes you family." The word landed in the room the way the true words always land, not dramatically, not with the theatrical weight that moments like this are supposed to have in the imagination. Simply, completely, with the specific gravity of a fact that has been waiting to be spoken and has finally arrived at its right moment. Femi looked at me. His face had the expression I had been prepared for and was not fully prepared for. The expression of someone who has just received information that reorganizes everything they thought they understood about their own life, and who is holding the reorganization with the specific dignity of someone who has learned from a grandfather they never stopped thinking about that the weight of a thing is not a reason to put it down. "I didn't know," he said, quietly. Not a defense. A fact. "I know you didn't," I said. "That's why we're in this room." Emeka said, "Neka." His voice had something in it I had not heard from him in years. Something underneath the composure. Something that was not anger or calculation, but the specific, raw quality of someone who has been handed a truth they were not expecting and is trying to find the correct posture for it. "What does this mean?" "It means," I said, "that we have a debt to this family that is 37 years old, and that I intend to pay it." I looked at Barrister Ease. She opened her folder. She placed the first document on the table, and the room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when what is coming cannot be stopped, and everyone in the room can feel it arriving. Barrister Ease placed 3 documents on the table, not dramatically, with the specific professional calm of someone who has handled significant documents in significant rooms for 20 years and understands that the documents themselves carry the weight without requiring the presentation to add to it. She placed the first document directly in front of Femi. He looked at it without touching it. "This," Barrister Eze said, "is a certified genealogical record tracing the Obi-Chukwu family lineage from Chukwuemeka Obi-Chukwu Sr., the patriarch, through his 2 sons, Chike and Chukwuemeka Jr., to the present generation." She paused. "It confirms, with documentary evidence, that Femi Adeyinka is the grandson of Chike Obi-Chukwu, and therefore the great-nephew of the late Chukwuemeka Obi-Chukwu Jr., founder of Obi-Chukwu Holdings." She placed the second document. "This is a legal opinion on the original 1987 inheritance settlement. The opinion was prepared at my request over the past 2 weeks. It assesses whether the settlement, the passing over of the elder son in favor of the younger, was conducted in accordance with the applicable law and the family's documented wishes at the time." She looked at the table. "The opinion concludes that the settlement was legally valid but morally inequitable, and that the disproportion between what the elder son received and what the younger son inherited was significant." She placed the third document. "This is a proposal for remediation, prepared by me at the instruction of the managing director, following her review of the genealogical and legal findings." The room was quiet. Emeka was looking at the documents with the expression of someone who has been standing on ground he believed was solid and has just been informed that the ground has a history he was not told about. Obinna was looking at Femi. Femi was looking at the portrait. My mother had opened her eyes. She was looking at the third document with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a thing for a long time and is watching it arrive with the specific, complete quality of someone who has fully imagined this moment and is finding that the reality is both smaller and larger than the imagination. "I want to be clear about something," I said. "This meeting was not called to redistribute the company. It was not called to reverse 16 years of decisions or to create a claim where one does not currently exist." I looked at Femi. Femi has not asked for anything. He does not know what he is owed. He came to this room because I asked him to come and because the truth belongs to him, regardless of what he does with it. I paused. "What I am proposing," I said, "is a correction, not a legal reversal. A moral one, because my father spent 40 years knowing he had taken something that was not entirely his, and he died without making it right, and the company he built, and that I have been running for 16 years, has been carrying that unpaid debt in its foundation." I looked at my brother. "We all have." Emeka looked at me. He had the expression of a man who is doing multiple calculations simultaneously. The legal calculation, the financial calculation, the family calculation, and underneath all of them, the specific calculation of someone who has spent 16 years in the specific pain of someone who believes they were passed over for what was theirs, and is now being told that the passing over went back further than he knew, and that the person who was first passed over was not him. "The remediation proposal," I said. Barrister Ease. Barrister Ease looked at the third document. "The proposal has 3 components," she said. "First, a formal acknowledgement, signed by the current family members in leadership positions, of the inequity of the 1987 settlement and its effect on Chike Obichukwu and his descendants. This acknowledgement is not a legal admission of liability. It is a record, a family record, of what happened and what should have happened." She looked up briefly. "Second, a financial settlement, the amount of which has been calculated by an independent financial advisor commissioned for this purpose, representing a reasonable present value equivalent of the share of the original inheritance that Chike should have received, adjusted for the growth of the company over 37 years, and discounted appropriately." She paused. "The amount is significant. It is funded from the managing director's personal shareholding, not from the company's operating capital." The room absorbed this. Amara looked at me. I had not told her. She was processing it with the expression of her father's face, and my discipline, and what she was producing from the combination was not objection, but the specific, focused attention of someone who is tracking something that matters. "Third," Barrister Easy said, "an offer of formal recognition of Femi Adeyenka as a member of the Obichukwu extended family, with whatever personal and professional relationship that recognition implies, as determined by the parties themselves over time." She set down the document. "The offer is exactly that. An offer. It carries no obligation. Femi is under no requirement to accept any part of this proposal." She looked at Femi. The room looked at Femi. He was still looking at the portrait. He had been looking at it since Barrister Ease began speaking. I watched him look at it, at my father's face, at the composed, specific expression of a man who had built something and had known that the building had a flaw in its foundation and had not known how to say it to the people who would have to live with the saying. Femi looked at the portrait for a long time. Then he looked at the table. Then he looked at me. "You found this," he said, "on your own." "Yes," I said. "No one told you," he said. "My father told me," I said, "before he died. Not the specifics, just the shape of it. He said he had taken something that wasn't entirely his. I paused. The specifics I found 3 weeks ago. Why? He said. I looked at him. Because your grandfather's name came up in a conversation, I said. And I heard it, and I understood what it meant. I paused. And because the company my father built deserved to be built on honest ground. And it wasn't. And I am the person responsible for what this company is now, which means I am the person responsible for correcting what it was built on. Femi was quiet. The room was quiet. Outside, the Abuja morning was doing what it did, the city moving through its usual enormous and indifferent life, completely unaware of what was happening in this room on the 14th floor. My grandfather, Femi said. Did he know about this company? About what it became? I looked at my mother. She answered. He knew, she said quietly. Her voice had the specific quality of someone speaking from a very long time ago. He kept track of it. Your father's company. The growth of it. She paused. He didn't come back. He didn't make contact. But he knew. Femi absorbed this. He wasn't angry, he said. It was not a question. It was the specific recognition of something about a person he had known and was fitting into a frame he had not had before. He was at peace, my mother said. That was what your grandmother told a mutual friend years after he died. She said he had made his peace with it. Femi nodded slowly. He looked at the documents on the table. He picked up the genealogical record. He read it carefully, the way he read everything, with the full attention of someone who understands that documents contain more than their words if you look at them long enough. He set it down. He looked at Emeka. Emeka was looking at him. Between the two of them, across the long mahogany table in the boardroom of the company that had been built on an old wrong, was something that did not have a simple name. The specific, complicated regard of people who have just been placed in a relationship they did not know they were in and are trying to understand what the placement means. Emeka said, Your grandfather. Yes, Femi said. He built a workshop, Emeka said. In Lagos, Femi said. I spent holidays there as a child. He taught me most of what I know. Emeka was quiet. He looked at the table. He looked at me. And something happened in my brother's face. Something I had been waiting for, without knowing I was waiting for it, for 16 years. The specific, quiet arrival of a man who has been angry for a very long time and has just been given a reason to put the anger down. Not resolution. Not the sudden, comfortable peace of a thing resolved. Something earlier than that. The specific moment before resolution when a person understands that the thing they have been angry about was not the right target. He had been angry at me. For being chosen. For running the company he had expected. For being the version of the family that had been preferred. And he had just been told that being preferred was a pattern in this family that had started before either of them were born. And that the first person displaced by that pattern was not him. It was Cheeky. And Cheek had built a workshop. And the workshop had produced a mechanic. And the mechanic had been maintaining the vehicles of the family that had displaced his grandfather for 3 years without knowing. Emeka looked at Femi. I'm sorry, he said. The 2 words fell in the room with the specific weight of words that have been a long time arriving. Not to me, to Femi. For something he had not done and had not been responsible for, and that his grandfather had absorbed and set down, and that the family had carried ever since. Femi looked at him. You don't need to apologize to me, Femi said. You didn't do it. No, Emeka said. But I've been running this company my whole life and I've never asked how it started. Not really. He paused. I should have asked. Femi was quiet. Then he said, My grandfather used to say that a mechanic's job is not to judge the engine for how it was built. It's to make it run well now. The past is what produced the present. What matters is what you do with the present. The room was very still. Obinna had not said anything since Barrister Ease began presenting. He was sitting with his hands flat on the table, and the expression of someone who has come to a meeting prepared for one thing and has received something so different from what he prepared for that the preparation is useless and he is standing in what is actually there. He was 29 years old. He had written a letter with 7 reasons, and the real reason, the look on his grandmother's face at the sound of a name, had turned out to be the thread that, when pulled, had unraveled something he had not known was there. I looked at him. "Obinna," I said. He looked at me. "The letter," I said. He said nothing. "I understood what it was when I read it," I said. "Not the 7 reasons, the one real reason." I paused. "You saw your grandmother's face, and you didn't understand what you saw, and your response was to remove the thing that produced the confusion." I looked at him directly. "That's your father's instinct. It's not wrong to have it. It becomes wrong when it bypasses the question." Obinna was quiet. "What question?" he said. "Why?" I said. "Always why first." He looked at Femi. The look had none of the wariness it had carried when Femi came through the boardroom door. It had something else. The specific, uncomfortable quality of someone who has been operating from a position and has just had the position removed from under them and is trying to find the ground. "I didn't know," Obinna said. The same words Femi had used. The same quality. Not a defense. A fact. "No," I said. "You didn't." I paused. "Now you do." I looked at the room, at my brother, who was looking at the documents with the expression of someone who has spent 16 years in the wrong direction and has just been turned around. At my daughter, who was looking at me with the focused, quiet attention she had inherited from 2 people who had both been worth inheriting it from. At my mother, who was looking at the empty chair at the end of the table, my father's chair in the boardroom, the one that was always left empty at family gatherings in the specific loyalty of a woman who had loved a man for 40 years and had held his memory with the same care she had held everything else. At Femi, who was holding the genealogical document and looking at his own name at the bottom of it, his name on a page that connected him to something he had not known he was connected to, in a room he had come to maintain vehicles and had arrived in, through the specific patient mechanism of the truth, as something else entirely. I looked at the portrait, my father's face. "You wanted to make it right," I said, to the portrait, to the room, to everyone in it. "This is making it right." The formal acknowledgement was signed that afternoon. All 4 of us, Emeka, Obinna, Amara, and I, signed a document that said, in the precise language that Barrister Easy had prepared, what had happened in 1987 and what it had meant for Chike Obichukwu and what the family acknowledged about the inequity of it. It was not a comfortable document to sign. Signing uncomfortable documents accurately was one of the things I had learned from my father. He had been better at building than at correcting. I intended to be better at both. Femi sat across the table and watched us sign. He did not rush us. He did not perform patience. He simply had it, in the same way he had it in the vehicle bay, in the workshop, in every space he had ever occupied. When the last signature was on the page, Barrister Ease notarized the document and placed it in her folder. Then she looked at Femi. "The financial settlement," she said. "There is no obligation to accept it today. You may take the documents, review them with your own legal counsel, and respond in your own time." Femi looked at the settlement document. He read it. He took longer with this one than with the others. When he finished, he set it down. "I want to tell you something," he said. To the room, Not to any one person. To the room, the way you speak to a room, when what you are saying belongs to everyone in it equally. We listened. My grandfather built a workshop, he said. When he left Enugu, he didn't have much. What he had was a skill and a principle. The principle was that work done honestly was its own justice. He paused. He never told my mother the full story. He protected her from it. He chose to give her a life that wasn't defined by what was taken from him. He looked at the portrait. I don't know if that was the right choice, but it was his choice, and it was made from dignity. He looked at me. What you're doing here, what you found and what you're correcting. My grandfather would have respected it, he said. Not because it gives him something back, because it's honest. He paused. Honesty after the fact is harder than honesty in the moment. It costs more. He would have understood the cost. He picked up the settlement document. I'm going to take this, he said, and I'm going to think about it. Not because I'm uncertain about who I am or what my grandfather was worth, because I want to receive it in the right way, the way he would have received it. He looked at Amika. I'd like to bring my mother, he said, when the time is right, for her to meet the family. He paused. She doesn't know. I'll have to tell her. Another pause. I think she deserves to be in the room for whatever comes next. Amika looked at him. Yes, Amika said. Simply. The word of someone who has arrived at a position honestly and does not need to decorate it. Femi nodded. He stood. He looked at my mother. She was looking at him with the expression I had last seen on her face when she sat in his grandfather's empty chair and talked about a man who had built a workshop and made his peace. You look like him, she said. Femi looked at her. My mother says the same thing, he said. My mother smiled. The real one. The one she kept for the moments when something she had been hoping for arrived exactly as she had hoped. Femi left the boardroom. The room sat in the specific weighted silence of people who have been through something significant and have not yet found the language for what it was. Obinna looked at the empty doorway. Then he looked at me. I wrote that letter, he said. I know, I said. I was trying to protect something, he said. I didn't know what I was protecting it from. You were protecting an idea of this company, I said. The idea that what we have was simply built by good people doing good work. I paused. It was built by people doing good work, and by an old wrong that we hadn't corrected. I looked at him. Both things were true. You can't protect one by ignoring the other. Obinna was quiet. Then he said, What do I do with the letter? I picked up the letter from where it was still sitting. I had brought it to the boardroom, the single page with 7 reasons, and my 2 words at the top. I handed it to him. He looked at it. Then he tore it. Once. Twice. Into small pieces that he set on the table in front of him. Not dramatically. Simply. The way you dispose of something you no longer need. The months that followed were not simple. The financial settlement was accepted 3 weeks after the boardroom meeting, after Femi had consulted a lawyer, and after he had told his mother. He called me the day after he told her. She cried, he said. For how long? I said. An hour, he said. And then she asked me what my grandfather's face looked like in the portrait. I described the portrait. He was quiet for a moment. She said that's exactly how he looked when he talked about his brother, he said. Not angry, just knowing. Like he was carrying something and had decided not to put it down because putting it down would mean admitting how heavy it was. I sat at my desk. I thought about my father. They were the same, I said. Both of them carrying it, in different directions. Yes, Femi said. A silence. She wants to come, he said, to meet the family. Tell her to come whenever she's ready, I said. There's no urgency. There's no script. Just come. She came the following month. Adaeze Adeyinka arrived on a Saturday morning in the kind of quiet that belongs to things that have been a long time arriving. Not the noise of a dramatic arrival, not the ceremony that might have been designed for a moment like this. Simply a woman who had lived for 37 years, not knowing the full shape of her father's story, and had been given it at last. She was 59 years old. She had her father's eyes. My mother saw it immediately. She stood in the entrance of the house, the Maitama house, the one with the wood polish smell, and my father's chair, and she looked at Adaeze and she said, "You have his eyes. Exactly." Adaeze looked at her, and the two women, the widow of the man who had inherited, and the daughter of the man who had been passed over, stood in the doorway for a moment in the specific wordless quality of people who have been on opposite sides of an old story and have just been allowed to see each other clearly. Then my mother said, "Come inside. Let me make you tea." And Adaeze came inside, and the house held them both. The acknowledgement document was framed and placed in the company's boardroom, not on the main wall, on the side wall, near the door, in the specific position of something that was not decorating the room, but was part of its honest record, something that said, "This is what happened. This is what we did about it. This is the kind of company we intend to be." Emeka had suggested it. This surprised me. He had sat across from me a week after the boardroom meeting and said, "Put it on the wall." "Why?" I said. "Because every person who sits in that room should know that the company they're sitting in was built by people who made mistakes and tried to correct them," he said. He paused. "That's more honest than portraits." I looked at him. 16 years of distance between us. The specific, corrosive distance of two people who loved the same thing and had been standing on opposite sides of it. "Emeka," I said. He looked at me. "I know you wanted this company," I said. "Yes," he said. "I know it was wrong that it went to me instead of you," I said. "I know that's not the same wrong as what happened to Cheek, but it's real." He was quiet. "Our father made choices," he said finally. "Some of them were wrong, the one about Cheeky, the one about me." He paused. "I spent 16 years being angry at you for being chosen, but you didn't choose yourself. He chose you." He looked at the window. "And you've run it well. I can be angry at his choice and still acknowledge that." He paused. "It just took me this long to separate the two things." I looked at my brother, 50 years old, still carrying something, but carrying it differently. "You run the real estate division better than anyone I could have hired," I said. He looked at me. "I know," he said, without arrogance, the specific confidence of someone who knows the quality of their work and has decided to own it. "Then let's build on that," I said. He nodded. We sat together in the office for an hour, talking about the company, specifically, practically, without the specific static of two people managing the distance between them. Just two people who ran different parts of the same thing and were trying to make the thing work as well as it could. It was the first time we had sat together that way. It was the beginning of the practice of sitting that way. That was enough. Femi's fleet contract was renewed. For 3 years, the same terms, with a single addition, a clause specifying that the relationship between Femi Adeyinka and Obichukwu Holdings included an acknowledgement of his family connection, and that the contract existed independently of that connection and was maintained on the basis of merit alone. The clause was Femi's suggestion. "I don't want people to think the contract exists because of the relationship," he said. "It should exist because the work is good." "The work has always been good," I said. "Then the clause confirms that," he said, "and removes the question." I looked at him. "You're very clear about things," I said. "My grandfather was clear," he said. "I learned it from him." I thought about the notebook, the handwritten records, the specific organized clarity of a man who had decided that the work deserved to be documented with the same care it was performed. He was, I said. Apparently, it passes. Femi almost smiled. Obinna came to the workshop 6 weeks after the boardroom meeting, not officially, not for any specific reason. He just came. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon and stood at the entrance of Femi's workshop with the expression of someone who has decided to do a difficult thing and is doing it before the decision can soften. Femi was in the second bay working on an exhaust system. He came out when he heard a car. He saw Obinna. He stood with his hands at his sides and the neutral expression of someone who is waiting to understand the nature of the visit before responding to it. Obinna said, "I wrote the letter." "I know," Femi said. "I wanted to say that to you directly," Obinna said. "Not in a boardroom. Here." Femi looked at him. "Why here?" he said. Obinna looked at the workshop. "Because this is where you are," he said. "What you built, what your grandfather built." He paused. It seemed like the right place to say it. Femi considered this. Then he said, "Come in." Obinna came in. Femi showed him the workshop, not with any agenda, simply the way you show someone your space when you have decided that the showing is the right response to what has been offered. Obinna asked questions, not the strategic questions of the nephew of a managing director assessing a contractor. The genuine questions of someone who has arrived somewhere he did not expect to arrive and is trying to understand what he is looking at. They were in the workshop for 2 hours. When Obinna left, he shook Femi's hand at the entrance. The grip was different from any grip he had offered anyone in that family's orbit before. It was the grip of someone who has arrived somewhere honestly. "I'll come back," Obinna said. "The workshop is here on Mondays and Thursdays," Femi said. "I know," Obinna said. He came back the following Monday, and the Thursday after. And over the weeks that followed, the visits acquired the specific, accumulated quality of something that was becoming a thing. Not defined, not announced, just present in the particular way that real things are present before they have been named. 2 young men, one with his grandfather's resentment and his grandfather's intelligence, learning to carry the intelligence without the resentment. One with his grandfather's workshop and his grandfather's quiet, carrying both without needing to announce either. Finding, in a space that smelled of engine oil and honest work, the beginning of something that the families had not had in 37 years. Each other. 2 years after the boardroom meeting, I sat in my office at 7:45 in the morning while Halwa brought the coffee. The Abuja skyline was the same skyline it had always been. The city doing its enormous and indifferent work, moving through the morning with the complete disregard of a place that has seen many things and has decided that continuity is more important than any specific event. The company was what it had been built to be. Better in some ways. The fleet was running with the same consistency it had run for 5 years. Femi came on Mondays and Thursdays with his notebook and his quiet efficiency and the specific, easy familiarity of someone who was no longer simply a contractor, but was not yet something with a simple name and did not require a simple name. Emeka ran the real estate division with a quality that had improved since the boardroom meeting in ways that were visible in the numbers and visible in something harder to measure. The specific quality of someone who has set down something heavy and is moving differently without it. Obinna was working on a proposal for a new division, infrastructure development, which combined his father's real estate instincts with the specific technical understanding he had been building through his Thursday visits to Femi's workshop. The proposal was good. Better than I had expected. Specific in its targets, realistic in its timeline, honest about its risks. He had shown it to Femi before he showed it to me. I did not mention this, but I noted it. Amara was running the finance division with the focused, complete attention of someone who has watched a parent make a company into something honest and has decided that the honesty is the part worth continuing. My mother came to the office once a week. She sat in the boardroom, the same boardroom, and looked at the acknowledgement document on the wall with the expression she brought to the things she had been waiting for. And Adaise Adeyinka, Femi's mother, Chiki's daughter, the woman who had spent 59 years not knowing the full shape of her father's story, came to the house in Maitama on the third Saturday of every month. She and my mother sat in the sitting room. They talked about Cheek, about the workshop in Lagos, about the specific, particular man he had been, his quietness, his clarity, the way he moved through spaces that had not been designed for him with the ease of someone who had decided long ago that the spaces were not the point. They talked about my father, about the specific, particular man he had been, his ambition, his guilt, the 40 years of carrying. They talked about the children, about what the children had done with what they had been given, about what the children were building now. My mother told me once, after one of these Saturdays, that she had asked Adaise if she was angry. Adaise had said, "My father wasn't angry. Who am I to be angrier than he was?" My mother had said, "You have the right." Adaise had said, "The right and the choice are different things. He chose not to carry it. I choose the same." My mother had been quiet for a moment. Then she had said, "He made a wise daughter." Adaise had said, "He made a good workshop." The rest followed. I thought about that. A good workshop. The rest followed. I thought about my father's words. I took something that was not mine to take. He had said it as a confession, as a weight he was setting down before he could no longer carry it. What he had not said, what I understood now, 2 years and a boardroom meeting and a framed document and 2 Saturday women and a young man in a workshop on Thursdays later, was the part that came after the confession. The part where something was done about it. That part he had not lived long enough to see. I had lived long enough. I had done it. And in the doing of it, in the specific, difficult, necessary work of looking at something honestly and correcting it at the cost of comfort and certainty and the easy version of a family story, I had built something that my father had not been able to build. Not a company, not a division, not a financial settlement or a framed document, a foundation that was honest. That was the thing worth building. The only thing, in the end, that lasted. My name is Nneka Obi-Chukwu. I am 53 years old. I manage a company my father built on ground that was not entirely his. And I spent 2 years making the ground honest. It cost something. It was worth everything. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Femi's dignity, Nneka's courage, and the long, honest work of a family deciding to see itself clearly, then subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to know that correcting an old wrong is not weakness. It is the hardest and most necessary form of strength. Leave a comment telling us which moment changed something in you. The next story is already waiting. And it begins, as always, with a truth that has been patient long enough. Stay with us.